Bum 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 bum.
Tomatoes?
Hello, welcome to video 4, an Unreal concept, simple, interact, and inspect. Let me run through this example, show you what we've set up. Basically, we have the ability to go move around, it's our normal character. If we get near an item we can inspect, it's going to tell us, and we have a crosshair in the middle of the screen so we can actually know which item we're going to look at. If we click on the item with the E key, it will rotate it into our view, and then we can actually use the mouse to rotate the item around, kind of like we're inspecting it and looking at it. If we hit the E key again, we drop it, and then we can go back to moving. So like I can pick up this item down here, inspect it, it's a puzzle or whatever, and then E will send it back. And because we're using the crosshair, we can actually target an individual item out of a stack. And then this allows us to, rotate the item around, do whatever we want for inspecting. Let's go ahead and look at how this was set up. So all of this code is available, of course, on the source, and all of it is commented. We're just going to cover it an overview exactly how this was basically set up. Our character controls the majority of our stuff, as you can see here. If you notice, there's actually a lot of code in here. So let's go ahead and figure out what we're doing. We are basically using the mouse position when we've picked up an item. And based on where the mouse position is relative to the center of our screen, we are rotating it in that direction. So in order to do that, at the beginning of our gameplay, we're storing half of our width and height of our viewport so we know where the middle is. Now our gamepad, we can ignore. Our mouse input we'll go back to shortly, and our movement code we'll go back to shortly. Jumping we can ignore, and this is where some of the first part of our stuff matters. But let's go ahead and look at our line trace thingy, as it's appropriately named, so we can determine basically how we're getting our object into our pickup and go from there. We're using attached actors. If we were to go into here and hit play, and then let's grab my player, so let's start interact character, you'll notice there's nothing under it. We're to go to something and pick it up, you'll notice, well, we now have something under it. We have a simple pickable scroll. That's this item right here. And of course I can look around and hit E, and it's going to go ahead and disappear. We're using the attach and detach from actor nodes in order to basically pick that item up, make it part of us, and then manipulate it as needed. We are using animations and timeline animations to bring the item to us and let the item go back from us. So that's kind of important for our interaction event. We want to see if we're actually interacting with anything right now. If we are, if for example we're firing off our timeline because we have the animation of the item coming to us or going away, we don't want to interact again. So that's really important. So are we animating an object? Yes or no? If we are, do nothing. Okay, well let's see. What's next? Do we have an attached actor? This is a really good, easy way to determine if we actually are doing something, rather than to keep it a bool of did we pick up something? Are we holding something? Are we interacting with something? We use a physical object check to determine if that's true. If we have something attached to us, then we know we have something attached to us. It's valid. If not, it'll be invalid. So if it's not valid, so our first time through, we're going to do a line trace. And it's basically going to be a line trace from where we are forward a little bit, which I just simply have a macro right here to make things simpler and cleaner. And we're going to determine if it is something in front of us, if we've hit something or not. Now, since we don't want the thing we're hitting to be across the screen, we're going to want to do just a short little check on distance. So all this does is say, hey, where's our actor? Where's what we hit? And is the vector less than or equal to 165? That's the unit I chose. And is the item a pickupable object? We're using a normal implement interface check to see if it implements pickupable. Pickupable is a horrible name to say, but I couldn't think of a better one. But basically, is the item pickupable? that we hit with the line trace end, is it within 165? If it is, well, we're close enough to pick it up. If not, well, we really don't care. Okay. So we need to store a reference to the item then. So we're going to say, hey, that's our attached actor. We're going to figure out where we picked it up from so we can return it later. And then we're going to store where we're going to go to. Basically, where is our player? Where in the world is this item going to be once we pick it up, attached to our player? We're caching that because we're going to do a timeline between where it's going to and where it came from. We say, okay, now we're animating, so no longer allow us to interact with anything. Disable the collision on that item, and then fire off our timeline. And our timeline's pretty simple. Hey, where are we coming from? Where are we going to? Let's go ahead and lerp between a rotation and a vector and set our location. So that gives us the effect of picking up the item and having it rotate to and from us. The from is just basically a reversal of the to, but as you can see, we can pick up stuff and put it back, and it's going to be, doesn't matter where we're at, the item's going to go back to where it was, and it's going to come into us the correct orientation and rotation. After we're done, we're going to go ahead and set the rotation, location and the rotation to 0. This is kind of important when you are attaching things. If you attach them with their default values, it's going to inherit them, and the item's actually going to end up somewhere else. So before you attach something, it's best to make sure it has a zeroed out location and rotation. That way when it attaches itself naturally rather than offset. Then we're telling it to attach to ourselves. Pretty simple. Hey, Mr. Item, attach yourself to the anchor slot. The anchor slot is just a scene component in front of my camera. It could be anywhere. We could say, okay, well, we want it here. And then now when we play, the item's going to be closer to us, which, as you can see, is a severe issue because of the fact that that's technically too close to us. If we set it out here, this result's kind of weird because we take the item and we pull it back farther. We can still manipulate it and do everything like normal, and it's going to go back. It just pulls it out. This is all basically set on where you want it to show up and where your interaction range is and all those options, how your camera's set up and everything. I just set it up like this and it gives us a decent look. Okay, once we're done with that, we want to make sure we set our collision to not collide. This item has collision by default, and if we don't disable the collision when it attaches itself to our parent, we can now have it collide as an attachment and we will just go flying off into midair. So these three things are really important when you're attaching. Make sure it's attaching without any altered location and rotation, and make sure you adjust the collision as needed. After that, we just show our mouse cursor. We go ahead and tell it we're no longer interacting with anything. We change our text to be E to drop item now instead of pick up, and then we turn our crosshair on. Because we have this set up where the crosshair and the text only shows up when we're near our items. So there's no reason for our crosshair to be out here. You know, if we're not interacting with anything, we don't need a crosshair. It gives it a little bit of a nice UI effect where basically, hey, only show up when you're near something. And then the crosshair, of course, if we're near something and we're inspecting, we no longer need the crosshair. We only need the crosshair when we're not inspecting anything. Okay. Now let's say we had something picked up. We go to this branch right here. Are we no longer interacting with anything? Our animation. Okay, no animation. Well, do we have something attached to us? Well, we do. Well, if we told it to interact and we have something attached to us, we must want to let go of it. So we're going to go ahead and call a detach. Really simple. Tell it we're interacting because we're firing off our reverse timeline, basically. And our reverse timeline is basically going to go from where it is now, our anchor that was attached to us, to where we want it to go in the world. And we go ahead and set the location and the rotation. Once we're done, we set our transform back to where it was originally. That's why we stored it. We want to make sure it goes back to the proper position. Then we go ahead and set its collision back to collide. Clear our reference. This allows us to do our isValid check if we have something attached to it. Show our mouse cursor as hidden, so we no longer have our mouse cursor. We're no longer having a timeline. Change our text to pick up now, toggle the crosshair back on because we don't have anything in our hand, and then give our input back to the game mode. That is our basic code that handles the clicking the mouse button, or the E to pick up and the E to drop. And you notice it handles the rotation from where we're at and handles picking it up properly. Since we're doing a line trace forward, it allows us to make sure we hit only the correct item. Now, our next sections are basically our UI sections here. Basically show our UI only when we're close to an object, and show our UI only when we are far away from it, or hide it when we're far away from an object. And this one I handled kind of differently. What I did was created a sphere around our player. This is our sphere of influence. This is our crap that's around a sphere, and basically we want this sphere to determine if we can do stuff with things. So whenever we overlap something with our sphere, if it's a pick-upable object, and we have a valid text pickup widget, basically our widget on the screen that we're creating, we're going to want to do a check on this. This is handy because, hey, have we created a widget? Yes or no. If we have, well, we already have a widget on the screen. We don't need to do anything. If we don't have a widget on the screen, well, create one, store it, and add it to our viewport. This allows us to have multiple items in the same spot. We're colliding with all of these items at this point in time, but only have our widget show up once. And we do pretty much the exact opposite. When we leave, do we have a valid text widget object? Do we have something attached to us or not? And then go ahead and remove it from the parent and set our widget to nothing. So this handles going into something and away from something. This is our rotational code for when we have something picked up. And this one's pretty simple. And so this one's sort of simple. This one's just a bunch of math to play with numbers. This part's important, which we'll cover here in a second. But basically every tick, if we're clicking on something, we're going to go ahead and set the rotation of the actor based on where it currently is and where our mouse currently is. So here, for example, you can get the mouse position. We determine if it's within 10%, not within 10%. We determine how far away it is from the middle. And then we rotate appropriately in the correct direction. We make a rotator out of that. We add our current rotation to the new rotation and we set it. This gives us the effect of picking up an item, and you notice how I'm over here, I can rotate. If I move over here, I can rotate. And then the closer we get to the middle, will determine what we're rotating. But the nice thing about this is you don't have to click on the item to rotate. You can click anywhere in the screen to rotate in the appropriate direction. We're technically testing against the object, but we're testing in the way where we're just keeping track of if the mouse was clicked on or not. Not the mouse was clicked on. Whether the mouse was down or not. And that's determined up here, keeping track of if the player's holding the mouse down. Do we have something, basically left mouse down? Is something attached? Then the attached item was clicked on. If something was attached when we release it, we're going to go ahead and tell it wasn't clicked on. So this allows us to, because the issue is if you're checking for a click, and you'd have to click on the item itself to determine if it's clicked. By capturing the mouse itself, we can basically say, hey, you've been clicked on because we have something attached to us. So it allows us to rotate, spin, and do all that stuff anywhere on our screen. It gives us a little bit smoother flow. Okay, so we have a couple different things up top, and these are things I said I'd go back to. If I was to play this, pick up an object, and use my arrow keys, they don't work. Jumping works, but the arrow keys don't work. Why is that? Well, we basically have a check. Do we have something attached? Yes or no? If no, go ahead and do your movement input. This is a way of disabling the movement input on the mouse and the keyboard by simply determining a valid check. Do we have something attached to us that we don't want to move? And the nice thing is it's super simple. As you saw in there, we had our jumping working, which we didn't want. We plug this into here. Now, if something is attached to us, we're no longer going to allow ourselves to jump. We'll go back over here. We can jump fine. We pick up an item. jumping no longer works. We drop it, we can jump again. So this simple check, the is valid node, is really strong if you use it appropriately. If you make sure you use it as a, not only a null check before you do an operation, but you use it as a, hey, we did something, we're holding something, we have a widget on the screen, we shouldn't do it again. Or we're holding something, let's not do an action based on that. Let's fix our little commenty code here. There we go, like that. There we go. And we'll move it over. Okay. I'll move it up one. So what else do we have in here? So yeah, again, disabling. This is our normal movement stuff. This is our line movement. This basically covers all of the stuff inside of our character. Now our other items. We have our player controller. And our player controller is just a data object. There's nothing special in here except for enabling click events. This one's kind of important. If you don't have this turned on, you can no longer click on, you can't click on anything. Click events won't work. So on clicked and things like that don't work. This is important to make sure this is turned on if you want click events to work. And it has to be done inside your player controller. We have our game mode, which is simply holding stuff, making sure we have the proper player controller set up and our proper player set up. We have our widget. Our widget is really simple. Let's zoom in on it. It basically holds our crosshair and it holds our text. And we have simple toggle whether or not the crosshair turns on or turns off. So it's really super simple. The next stuff is our interface for our pickupable object. And if you'll notice, it's empty. Well, there's no specific events I'm firing inside of there. I'm basically using this interface to determine if it's an item that should be picked up or not. For example, if we wanted, let's say this item right here. Let's say we did, this is our apple. We're going to go ahead and duplicate our apple, and we're going to call this a prop apple. We could go into our prop apple. We can tell it, full blueprint editor. Oh, it's so annoying. Class settings. We will tell it it is not. Oh, yeah, see, that's not going to, because we do, wait a minute. Did I child this? No, okay. So basically what I was, okay. So let me explain, let me delete this. I need to explain our hierarchy first and then we'll fix that. The hierarchy for the pickupable objects is basically a simple pickupable object. This is an object that has a root and then a cube attached to it. This would technically be like a static mesh is what you would want. But the point of this is it has the pickupable interface implemented. It's nothing fancy, it's just meant to be an object that we can pick up. And so I created child objects from it. Now in this case, I would need to duplicate my base object, and we'll call this one the simple prop object. Our prop object is going to be the same as our other object, except it's not going to have the pickupable interface like that. So let's go ahead and create a child of that one, and we'll call this one, well, apparently it ended up over here. There we go, prop object apple. And let's go ahead and let's go into here. We're going to go to our cube, and this is just a cube with 0.2.2 with red. So we'll go to our prop apple. Where did our prop apple go? There we go. And we're going to make this a 0.2.2.2 with red. That, okay. And this should basically look the same as our other one right here. So here's a prop apple. We'll go ahead and let's make one object we can interact with, and then two objects we cannot. We'll go ahead and hit play. Now if we're over here, if I hit E, well, nothing. I hit E, nothing. We can only interact with that one object because that's the only object we have as pickupable. And again, it's because it's using the interface. And that's it. That's pretty much our interact and inspect. It could use some work. You could make it, for example, as you saw in here, where when we were focusing on an item that we couldn't pick up, that it was still showing us our text. That's pretty simple. We have inside of our character, again, we have our little line trace right here. Where is it at? Line tracing. Here we go. Yep. Line trace, nothing picked up. We have our check right here. You could have it where if the item that's in front of us, well, technically we do this line trace on the interact. Line traces are not too expensive. You could simply have this same line trace here where we're checking to see if something's in front of us and interactable. And you could move this line trace into the tick. And you could have it where it would basically determine if an interactable object is in front of us. So our text would only show up if the interactable object was in front of us rather than around us. So that's an easy way to get around that. These are small things. Again, this is a concept. This is meant to show something. This is meant to show the ability to pick up an item, manipulate its location and rotation, the ability to basically interact with something and inspect it. You know, we go over, here's our scrolls, we pick it up. Oh, this is pretty cool. It's a puzzle. We look at it, we put it back down, it goes back. We continue on with our game. That's it. It's meant to show attaching actors and simple stuff like that. That is going to wrap up our simple interact and inspect concept. Remember, we are using the attach to actor. Let's see. These are the important things to know. We're using an attach to actor to add them to our actor. We are manipulating the location and rotation and the collision on the item we're attaching to prevent issues. We are storing the position of the item so that way when we put it back, it can go back to the same position. We are attaching simply to a scene component, which is attached to our camera. That way it's always going to be relative to the first same location. We are preventing our player from moving by doing a simple valid check. Hey, is something attached to us? Don't do anything. We are cheating by basically keeping track of if our left mouse button is down and something is attached to us in order to allow us to rotate the entire screen. And we're using a sphere object to basically determine if anything around us should be interactable to allow our UI to hide or unhide. And that is going to wrap up the Unreal concept for simple interact and inspect.